Welcome to Re-Automated the Podcast, Episode 2, Are Robots Stealing Jobs? I'm your host, Chris Savoya with Universal Robots. Today, I'm joined by Jeff Burnstein, the President of Association for Advancing Automation. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So let's jump right into it. How does someone with a bachelor's degree in English language and literature from the University of Michigan win the Nobel Prize for Robotics, the Engelberger Award? Tell us your story.
Well, it does seem rather unusual, I'll admit. I'm probably the first person with an English major ever to win an Engelberger Award. And when I first was told that I was winning, that was my first thought. Wow, this is unbelievable. I have no technical background. I grew up with no interest really in manufacturing or engineering. I had no idea what a robot was. And I was an English major in college, and here I am winning this award. But I gave it a little more thought, Chris, and I realized, well, why do I think I'm winning this award? And I think it's because I'm a good storyteller. And I got involved with the story of robotics in 1981. It was going to be the next industrial revolution. And everything was pointing up and to the right. There would be millions of robots out there. Every industry would have them. I wanted to be a part of telling that story. Now, unfortunately, over the course of the next few years, the story changed quite a bit. The robot industry collapsed nearly. It was left for dead by a lot of people because there were so many orders. Yeah, so many orders had been canceled in the mid-'80s, and it was a question of whether the robot industry had disappointed everyone, whether it really was going to make a mark. And so the story I had to tell was quite a bit different in the mid-'80s than it was when I got involved in the early '80s. But we fought our way back, and here we are on the precipice of being one of, if not the most important industries of the 21st century. Pretty proud of that. Yeah. So I think my storytelling ability has been a really important part of the story.
It's certainly a hot topic nowadays. It seems like, being in the robotics industry, talking to my grandmother, things like that, the kind of conversations I have now versus even 10 years ago are very interesting, for sure. So this story of yours kind of started in Detroit. Is that correct?
It is. My first job out of college was promoting downtown Detroit. And at that time, there was another great story. Detroit was billing itself as Renaissance City, coming out of a terrible period where the riots of the late 60s left Detroit in a pretty bad spot, building its way back. And I was meeting with business leaders and the news media and the public, anybody who would listen, about how important Detroit was and all the great things that were happening there. It took Detroit a long time to get where it is today, where all of that is finally being realized. Detroit's a great city now, but when I was telling that story, it was just starting on its journey. Very similar to what happened when I started talking about robotics.
Yeah, I have to say, going to Automate for the first time in Detroit seemed like a real, kind of coming back party. It was awesome to see how much Detroit has come back even since the economic recession in the early 2000s. It was really cool. And it seems like with the Association for Advancing Automation and with the Automate trade show that you're really kind of bringing some of that spice back to Detroit as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much excitement in the city and in the state of Michigan about Automate being there again this year. The show is bigger than it's ever been. And it's incredible. All the restaurants that have opened in Detroit. I mean, the pandemic shut off a lot of what was happening. But now it's coming back again as we are in the latter stages and maybe done for now with the pandemic. And it's just a great time to be in the city.
Yep, totally. So can you give us an introduction to your job as the president of the organization for the Association for Advancing Automation, or otherwise known as the A3?
Sure. Well, if you look at what our main mission is, it's to educate companies on how to successfully apply robotics and automation. So automation covers a lot of other technologies as well as robotics, machine vision, artificial intelligence, motion control, and many others. And my job is to be out there advocating for the industry, whether it's to government leaders or to the news media or again, to the public, to make them comfortable that robotics can help solve not just problems in manufacturing or logistics or, a few industries, but every industry, and also the big challenges we face as a society, dealing with issues like hunger or climate change or elder care. We have the potential with robotics to really make a difference to make people's lives better.
Yes. Yes, totally. So the Association for Advancing Automation, I recall a sort of rebranding in the last few years or something. I believe before it was three separate entities, really. It was the RIA, the Robotics Association. It was the Motion Control Association, and then the AI, Artificial Intelligence Association. So what caused you to decide to join these three things together under the one brand of A3?
Okay, it's actually four because we had a Vision and Imaging Association too.
That's right.
So the AI is the newest one. So here's what was happening, Chris. Companies were saying, well, I'm involved in robotics, and they would join the Robot Association. And some companies were primarily doing vision. They would join the Vision Association. But end users need solutions that incorporate all of these technologies. And there are companies like Intel and Google and Microsoft who are active in all of these technologies. And they would ask us, why do we have to join multiple associations to get all of this amazing information you have on these technologies? Doesn't make sense to us. Why is there one thing we can join?
So you mentioned some companies like Google and others that are large companies that join the Association for Advancing Automation to be able to see all of the technologies that are involved with it. What is it like on the other side of that as an end user or a customer or someone who wants to adopt automation for the first time and use it in their firm? What is that like when they join the A3?
Well, they have access to a tremendous amount of information, articles, videos. They can attend our members only event, the A3 Business Forum. There's just a lot of value in being a user member to make the connections to the companies that are leading the industry and to have a voice in the association. Look, we work with FedEx and UPS, and they've been instrumental in what we're doing in terms of events like the Autonomous Mobile Robots and Logistics event, for instance. They are really important, obviously, to the suppliers. They want to know what the association should be doing. Standards, we work with the users on standards. I mean, it's really critical that we have user involvement, and that's been true from the beginning. And I think that makes us a little bit different than a lot of associations. We've always had major user representation in the association.
Very good. So changing topics a little bit, what motivated you to to get involved in the robotics and automation industry in the first place?
Well, I mentioned that right out of college, I started working to promote downtown Detroit, and I learned a lot of things about associations. And then I wanted to be a sports writer, so I was hired or offered a job. I didn't accept it, to be a reporter at a local newspaper where I would cover sports and school board meetings and other things in the community. It was a weekly newspaper, but there was a problem, and the problem was I had to work on a manual typewriter. And I only knew how to work on an IBM Selectric because that's what I did in high school. And so I couldn't do it. I mean, I literally could not hit the keys on the manual typewriter. So I said, I don't want that job. And the other thing is, of course, it wasn't just sports. And I didn't really want to do cover the local community and say nice things about that community because I didn't even live in that community. I didn't even know it. So I wanted to do something else with PR. I was applying to a PR firm. They didn't have an opening for me. I had decided that, okay, I need to have a job. And so after I left my first job, I briefly took a job at an ad agency. That didn't work out. So I went to this organization called the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. It was a job. It was a job. The robot people were all part of that organization, and I was assigned to some projects that dealt with promoting robotics activities. And I thought, this is the coolest thing. And again, this technology was going to be the industrial revolution of the world at the time that I got involved. And I love telling the story. Ironically, when the PR firm finally called a few weeks later after I got the job at SME, and they said, hey, we got a job for you. I said, no, I'm good here. And turned out to be the right decision. The robot people broke away from SME. So there were 300 people working with SME. The robot people broke away. Shortly after I joined them, I was employee number 5. And I've gotten to do so much in the past 40 years now. This is my 40th year at what is now A3, which started out as just RAA. And it's been a really fun 40 years. It's gone by a little too
40
quickly.
years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
I remember you doing that at the A3 Business Forum, kind of making everyone raise their hands in terms of who's been in this industry the longest. I think you were on that last round of hands that raised up. Yep. So it seems like you've really kind of found your niche in terms of being the translator in some ways between a very technology laden industry of robotics where there's some deep technical things that are going on and very, very hard problems to kind of the layperson or to the rest of the world to really translate what is actually happening in this complex field out in terms of business problems and societal problems. How have you refined that approach over the last 40 years?
Well, again, you think about somebody like me with an English major who starts out and he's hearing all these technical concepts with no technical background of any kind. And I realized there is a need for a translator because who is a PR person talking to? They're talking to the press. The press doesn't care about how it works. The public doesn't care about how it works. The policymakers don't care about how it works. They want to know how it benefits society or people or them. And they want to know why this matters to anybody. I mean, knowing how many axes it has or, how fast it moves, that means nothing to anybody. What is the problem it can solve? Even the business owners, a lot of them aren't that technical. You're a small business. You don't really necessarily have the technical expertise. You know you're doing something and you can't do it as effectively as you would like. Maybe this technology can help you, but you have to explain, how can it help? Forget the how it works part. That may be important to some people, the engineering people, of course, but the people I was dealing with, they just didn't care. And I focused on what they did care about.
Very good. Yes, it's true. In talking to owners of firms or manufacturers, logistics, whatever, they care about labor, really. It seems like that is the hot topic nowadays. And the lack of labor, we've heard the often recited statistic that 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. And with that, taking a lot of knowledge with them as they retire. What do you say to a company that is facing a labor shortage? How would you recommend that they adopt automation to help solve their business problems?
Well, first of all, we have to make sure that is the solution. So we encourage companies to come to us. We feel we're a trusted resource and look at the resources that we can provide in terms of information and also connections to companies that supply either the robots themselves or the vision systems or the system integrator network that is very powerful right now, or the distributors. And we say, start smart. Don't try and accomplish everything all at once. Don't make the mistake of thinking robots or whatever the technology we're looking at is going to solve every one of your problems. Let's start with an easy problem, not the most difficult. It gets some comfort level with the technology. The people that you have need to see that this is going to solve problems and then build from there. But don't wait, because waiting is the worst thing you can do right now.
Yes.
The whole world is automating. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It used to be just manufacturing and then logistics, electronics, aerospace, consumer goods, food, retail, agriculture, construction. It doesn't matter anymore. Every industry is looking at automating. So you can't sit by idly. You have to investigate this and figure out if there are automated solutions that will help you become more competitive.
Start smart is a great turn of phrase, Jeff. I love that. We oftentimes say low-hanging fruit. I think it kind of means the same thing. One of the people that I follow in the industry is from Procter & Gamble, and they were really on the leading edge of adopting a lot of automation. They were kind of the first ones to get in there and really do large-scale logistics rollout with With industrial robots, they were on the forefront of the collaborative robot movement. And so they're kind of saying they've actually attacked some of those low-hanging fruit, and that they need to find the next thing. They need to find out what that next branch is going to be for everyone. So using your crystal ball, do you see any kind of technology on the near horizon that will bring more robot opportunities or just general automation opportunities within reach for companies?
Well, I mean, one of the developments we're seeing is the advance of artificial intelligence. So robots are becoming smarter. And what type of applications will a smarter robot be capable of doing? And I mean, companies like Procter and Gamble and many others have tasks that, you know, people are really good at using their brain. And the robots are really good at doing repeatable activities. But if you can't find people, what is using its brain? So how are we going to make the robots smart enough to do some of these tasks that right now we can't find people to do, even though they would be good at them? So I think you're going to see more advances due to not just advances in artificial intelligence, but machine vision as well, because the robot needs to see, and we're making progress there. The robot needs to be able to manipulate things, and we're seeing advances in gripping technology. So a lot of these other enablers are emerging and improving that will allow robots to do more applications.
Very good. Do you have any examples of how companies have successfully implemented robots, motion control, vision, or AI in their firms and in their everyday lives, while also being able to create new job opportunities? Because there's this sentiment that robots take jobs.
Yeah, I've been talking about that for 40 years, Chris. Our position is that robots actually save and create jobs, that they're better, safer, and higher paying jobs as well. Let me give you an example of a company in Baltimore, Maryland called Marlin Steel. Okay, small business, they made bagel baskets. All they had to do was have a basket that kept a bagel from falling on the floor, and you had a good product. Problem was, the Chinese decided they wanted to get in this business. They were able to make the product in China, ship it to the US, and sell it to the store for less than Marlin Steel could buy the aluminum for. So the owner of the company, Drew Greenblatt, said, what are my choices here? I mean, I could shut the business down, I could manufacture it in China, or I could try to automate. So he did that. So what happened was, he installs the automation robot. All of a sudden, the problems he was having with quality go away. The basket gets better. The problems he had of his staff getting injured from, bending things and loading machines, they were getting injured all the time. Those problems went away. And because the baskets were better, some companies looked at this, like medical device companies or aerospace companies that had a high value product that they needed to put in a basket. They came to him and they said, hey, could you make a basket that would hold this very valuable product? And Drew said, yeah, I can do that. It'll cost more. And they said, yeah, we'll be happy to pay more than you're charging for the bagel basket, because this is a really important piece that we need put in the basket. So he realized he's in a new business now. The quality, the productivity, the safety, all of those things. As a result of all of that, is he's starting to sell to higher value customers than bagel shops. He's winning all this new business. People aren't getting hurt, and he ends up hiring more people. And that's not an isolated story. There are a lot of companies that have told me similar stories, that the automation did the tasks that the people, didn't want to do. There was a lot of turnover in some of these dull, dirty, dangerous jobs. And the automation enabled them to grow the company, get new business, hire more people. That's really important. We looked at this over a 3-decade period. We found whenever robot sales go up in America, unemployment goes down. When robot sales go down, unemployment goes up. Certainly doesn't look like a job killer to me.
Yes, exactly. So at Marlin, do you recall whether they decided to kind of roll their own and bite off and try and automate themselves? or were they kind of looking to bring in an external expert, like a system integrator or something like that, to help them on their automation journey?
I don't remember specifically if they brought in an integrator. I don't know the answer to that. But I know some companies who, with a similar story, who have worked with integrators, and
Hmm.
then decided, at least one of them decided to form their own integration company because they became so expert at it internally. They decided, hey, we can sell our expertise outside of our own company because there's a company, Vickers Engineering on the west side of the state of Michigan, automotive supplier. The head person there, Matt Tyler, used to tell his team, if you're speccing a robot on this job, I want to know why. Then they started automating. They eliminated all the problems that they had of people starting, not liking their jobs, leaving, they having to hire more people, all this churn. The robots took those tasks and did them very successfully. The company became more productive. They were able to lower their costs. They won their biggest customer ever because of that. They had better quality, lower costs than ever before, greater productivity. And as a result of winning this big order from now their biggest customer, I believe, still, um, they also were able to hire more people. And I think this is an example of when this was done, when they realized how successful it was to automate. Matt Tyler's used to tell his team now, if you're not specking a robot on this job, you better tell me why. Complete
Hmm.
180 because he saw the value.
Very good. Yeah. And you mentioned Start Smart, and it seems like you've talked to thousands of manufacturers in your 40 years. So, what do you see as the most common challenge that prevents them from adopting automation in the beginning? Is it the sentiment from the workers around them, or is it the lack of skilled labor or people that know how to use robots? What are some of the things that prevent them
It's
from
a lot of
adopting?
those things. It's a lot of those things, but it's also um, there's a perception out there that's been around for a long time. If you're a small and medium sized company, you might think it's too complicated, it's too difficult, it's too costly, it'll take too much time, it will cause too much disruption, whether among the people who work there or in the processes. But the reality is, over time, the industry has made ready made solutions. They've solved problems, and you can be up and running quickly. We've made it easier to use, we've made it less costly, we've made it less of a need to have a skilled labor team in house who can manage all this. So the industry's done a great job of creating solutions that are, as I said, easier to use and more affordable. But you have to get that message out. There's a lot of small businesses out there in every industry. Then you have this problem, I guess, of if you're in an industry that nobody's been automating and you've never automated, who do you look to? You
Yeah.
don't have peers. If you're necessarily, whether it's a retail store or a agricultural, business, you don't necessarily have a whole lot of peers that have been doing this. So you can learn from maybe other industries. How did they do it? How did they get started? And that's one of the things that A3 adds value at our conferences and on our website. You can find all this information about how people have handled similar challenges just in a different industry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Would you generally recommend that a small and medium sized business try to do it themselves and figure out automation on their own in order to build some internal knowledge? Or do you think it's valuable for them to go through an integrator to have access to those services that an integrator would provide? It's hard to say a blanket statement, of course, but what are some of the things that you would look for to make that recommendation one way or another?
I think it depends on how the application is structured. Is this something that is so simple that it's ready to go? I put it here, I turn it on. You know, that you probably don't need an integrator for. But if it's something that ties into an entire process, it would be a big mistake to try it yourself without an integrator or some assistance unless you really were confident. Because then if it doesn't work, you're going to kind of turn off robots, right? Oh, it didn't work. Better to spend the money up front, get the integration, get the expertise, and get confident that this is a technology that can help you.
Yes, very good. That makes sense. I agree. Kind of see how someone else would do it first and then try and do it yourself after. Does the A3 have any resources? I think I've heard of an integrator program that the A3 offers. Can you tell us more about that?
We have a certified robot integrator program where you know that the companies that have earned that designation have been audited by A3. They have proven over time that they're capable of handling jobs according to industry best practice. Again, we can't say that they're better than anybody who doesn't have that designation. We're not trying to say that at all. What we're trying to say is these are people who we've audited who follow industry best practices. Might be a good starting place for you if you're new to this business. The reason we did that, just a little history on why we have a certified robot integrator program. During the Great Recession, a lot of companies had to trim their workforce, okay, in the robot business. And a lot of people decided, I'm going to start my own integration firm. And I'm going to sell an integration service for less money than the big integrators. Mm-hmm. And here was the problem. They didn't have the expertise. They'd never been involved in integration. The customer would hire these people based on a low cost bid, and then it wouldn't work. And they had to go get the more expensive bidder anyway to finish the job. That gave the industry a bad black eye. And so we decided, in conjunction with the integrators and the users, this was a need the users have to be able to say, hey, the reason we're using this bid instead of that one is these people have experience, and the association has audited them to make sure they have the people they say they have, and the backgrounds they have, and it's been a really great program.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's interesting. So there was a rush of kind of lower skilled, I guess you could say, automation integrators to market around that time. That brings up a good topic of skilling, of upskilling and reskilling and all this kind of stuff. One of the subjects that has been a very hot subject lately is China, and how much China is investing in their workforce to be able to use robots, in their robot manufacturers, to be able to be the largest robot provider in the world, but also to be the largest robot consumer in the world. And I believe that you've spent some time speaking in China and things like that. So, with that kind of lesson, what can we learn from what they're doing as a society towards automation, and learn to be able to bring back here to the US and Canada and North America?
Really interesting, Chris, and you're spot on in terms of what China's intent is. They've already become the biggest robot user in the world. They do want to be the biggest robot supplier in the world. That's going to be a more difficult challenge, I think. But what does it tell you if a country like China, that has an almost endless amount of people, who won all of this manufacturing business over the past 2 decades, let's say, has decided that they want to go all in on robots? What it tells you is having unlimited labor, having low-cost labor isn't the solution in a globally competitive world. Why? There's other countries that have lower cost labor. And what's the solution is the best quality, the best productivity, and the ability to get the product that the customer wants to them as quickly as possible. So China realized that, and they have a national strategy to do the things that you said. Other countries are starting to wake up to this, that automation is going to be a competitive advantage for their country, and they have to invest in automation and skilling their workforce to be able to do the jobs of the future. So
China's actually providing incentives then on both sides of the coin to be able to build up automation in their country.
Yeah, we need to do that too. We do some of it, but we could do more. Other countries are Japan, the EU, the UK is looking at incentives to automate, looking at national strategies to automate. We don't have that in the US. We don't have the incentives that we should.
It's interesting. It reminds me of kind of the big push from the federal government for electric vehicles and renewable energies. They incentivized it both on the manufacturing side, the people who create those products, and also on the consumer side, the people that will build those. But it did take, I mean, the cost calculus wasn't there for an electric vehicle 5 or 10 years ago, unless you were pretty wealthy, right? But now it's getting to the point, it's just starting to hit that inflection point where middle class people can start to afford an EV or can start to think about solar panels on their house. And it's really because of the subsidies that have been rolled out by the federal government in that regard. And it seems like we're kind of due for something like that for automation here as well.
Well, especially because you can't build those products without automation, right?
That's true.
I mean, these are critical. I mean, the biggest market right now for robotics is the automotive industry. And what's driving the big orders right now in automotive? It's electric vehicles. So, I mean, we got to think about that. We want companies to be able to use the technologies to do the things that you said you wanted. So I think we need to invest more from a strategic standpoint.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy from the investment perspective. You can invest in automation that will also have a return on investment into these other industries we're trying to subsidize. It's interesting. I have a personal passion around education and the idea of bringing new people into this industry. I think we have an awesome industry here in robotics, but I think it's smaller than it should be. And I think we need to work on bringing new people into it, young people, getting them excited for this kind of stuff. So what do you think we should be doing as a country in general to bring in people at the high school level, vocational level, or collegiate level? And really, what kind of skills should we be teaching people to use automation more in their everyday lives?
Well, this is one of the issues that I think is hurting us, that from an educational standpoint, we don't do a lot to teach hands-on skills or the skills that we're going to need in the future in our schools at an early age, or at any age, really. When I went to school, you had to take shop class, for instance. So you had to do things with your hands. I was terrible at it, by the way. But it was part of the curriculum.
Your fingers.
But it was part of the curriculum, right? Now, there's FIRST Robotics, there's VEX Robotics. These are all great programs to excite people about doing robotics. But guess what? They're extracurricular. They're not part of the curriculum. We need to start teaching people the skills that are going to be necessary in an increasingly automated world. And we're going to have to say to people, we don't want to leave anybody behind here. There's a role for everybody. And if you think about it, there's a role for people who design products. There's a role for people who do the manufacturing and the data science, the data analytics. But there's also always going to be a role for those hands-on skills too. And this is why community colleges and technical schools play such a key role in training people for the immediate needs that companies have. And we're not teaching our children as a nation that that's a good thing. We're prioritizing four-year degrees, but you know what? These certificates and community colleges and technical schools have a lot of value to add because there's a labor shortage. One of the barriers to selling more automation is that even the automation companies can't get enough people. And also the end users don't have enough people who know how to use these technologies and maintain them. So I just feel like this is going to continue to haunt us until we say, yeah, this is important to teach. It's important to provide programs. And this is the way of the future, these technologies.
Yeah. It seems like, with these 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day, we're losing these domain experts and people that are welders, people that are machinists and things like that. And there are vocational schools that are out there trying to, to stopgap that, right? But it's not enough. It seems like they need to have a little bit of diversification of skills, not just to be a machinist, but also to understand how to automate the machines to be a force multiplier and actually go out so that one person might be able to run 4 CNC machines and use their brain, as you said earlier, to actually tool up and fixture and kind of think through the process and the domain expertise, but allow the robot to do the, as you said, dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks of actually pulling the part out of the machine, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. I agree 100%.
Cool. Well, Jeff, we're going to move into the rapid fire section of this podcast. I'm going to ask you some questions. Just kind of give me your natural, honest answer as quick as you can. Are you ready?
I am.
Cool. What is one skill you think is essential for success in the field of robotics?
Flexibility. I think people need to really understand that they might learn one thing this day, and just what you said, we can train you to do something a little bit more. A little bit more makes you more valuable. Don't get so rigid that you can't learn new things and take on new tasks.
Very good. I love that answer. Question number 2. What book are you currently reading?
Well, because I'm winning this Engelberger Award, I decided to go back and read Robotics in Service by Joe Engelberger, published 1989, with an inscription to Jeff Burnstein, a stalwart defender, Joe Engelberger. So I'm really excited, obviously, about winning the award, but I went back and I read the book, or I'm reading the book. He was so far ahead of his time, talking about applications in service in a whole range of industries, surgery, healthcare, agriculture, construction. He has it all in the book. It's amazing.
Cool. That is a very cool copy. I'm jealous. I got to get a copy. I'm not going to get that copy, but I want a copy of that book. That sounds great. You should put that in like the A3 building or something like that and put it behind a case or something.
Good idea.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. And question number 3, who would you love to hear on this show in the future?
As Ben Ostergaard, co-founder of UR, because, I think that as Ben is a really interesting guy. I've had the chance to talk to him on many occasions and have a lot of respect for him. And I think I'd love to hear him on this podcast.
A fellow Engelberger Award winner, actually. Yes. I love that idea. Cool. And just to wrap up, where can we go to follow you? And where's the best place to see the work that you're going to be doing in the future?
Best place to follow me on LinkedIn, Jeff Burnstein on LinkedIn. But to follow the work that we're doing, automate.org. That's our website. And for anybody who's anywhere near Detroit, May 22 to 25, automateshow.com. Largest robotics and automation show ever held in North America.
Looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. It is the Reautomated Podcast, episode 2, Are Robots Stealing Jobs? Really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.